Let's talk about Thomas Paine. You just read a little bit about him. He's an example of a radical. He would be considered an English radical because the United States at this time was still English. But he is an example of essentially this English radicalism as it sort of spreads around the world. So Thomas Paine, common sense. Society is a blessing, government is an evil. Like a necessary evil, don't get me wrong, but it's still not good. Society is a blessing. So us, all of us, using our reason, sort of living together, this is good. Good stuff right here. The thing that's over it is it's an evil, a necessary evil, but an evil. Why do we have this thing then? Why does that thing exist? What Thomas Paine says is it exists because it can create freedom and security. Again, along the lines of John Locke, right? Why do we have a government? To have this sort of freedom and security. Okay, so does a king do that? Does a king create freedom and security? No, a monarchy doesn't do that. It's just one person, basically. And again, if there's one thing we learned about the Enlightenment on Wednesday, it's that you should be in charge of your own life. You should use reason and sort of make your own decisions for yourself. Why would you want to turn that over to another person to be in charge of that, like a monarchy? No, you wouldn't. You would essentially use your reason to make sure someone is in charge that you want in charge, and if they're not okay, then you get rid of them. So monarchy, What is the best is a free people, or what we're going to call a public, will use their reason to live well. Like why should we rely on this thing here, a king, when this person uses reason, this person uses reason, this person uses reason? If they all come together to use reason together, we don't really need that thing anymore. We need someone to, turn the lights on and off, but we don't need somebody to make decisions. We'll make the decisions. We just need somebody to run things once we've made these decisions. That is the public. So the public can get rid of this thing called a king. Don't be afraid to use violent revolution to put the people in charge. And that's essentially, again, from Thomas Paine's point of view, that's what a president should be, not a king. The president is the guy that essentially helps turn the lights on, turn the lights off, keeps things running, but we're the ones who make the decisions, the big decisions about what should be happening. That's the idea he's coming to. We call that today democracy. All right. And that leads us to the War of American Secession, which we know in the United States as the American Revolution. But of course, in England, it was the War of American Secession, where they say it sort of broke away. So let's just talk about this for a second. You guys I assume you've all taken, your fifth grade. Is it fifth grade? Whenever you learn about the American Revolution, to pay for that 7 years war, England passes a lot of costs onto the colonies, including the American colonies. And just like in London, just like those radicals in London we just talked about, the colonists claimed to be victims of tyranny. So the people in London were complaining the tyranny is the king's giving up all these hard-won gains for himself. And the colonists are claiming, you're making us pay for this war. Why do we have to pay for this war? It's none of our business. We didn't do this. And at the very least, if you're going to make us pay for the war, then we should have a say. The people should have a say. Remember, people should have a say in whether there's taxes or not. Remember, no taxation without representation. That kind of noise. Now the radicals in England, they tend to be kind of ambiguous about this war here. There's a couple things going on. Like on the one hand, they would say, John Wilkes would say, yeah, some of the issues of tyranny are interrelated. The king's kind of a jerk. And again, not just because he's a particular person who has a psychology of being a jerk, but kings equal jerks. I mean, that's just the way that it is. We got to get rid of this tyranny. The people should be in charge. But breaking away from England, I mean, these ideas of radicalism, whatever they are, they're spawned in England. I mean, why would you want to break away from the coolest place ever? And most saw colonists as ungrateful rebels, not just the radicals, but if you ever watched Hamilton, you know that's the King George, all of his songs is that essentially, you'll come back, you'll want me back again, that kind of thing. Many people saw these colonists as ungrateful rebels. King George III thought the colonists would be begging to come back to England in a few years, and honestly, that was almost true. I mean, if you read your American history textbooks, they kind of skip over that part, but it was actually true. Like, the people of America didn't like, or I should say the colonists of America didn't like this sort of not having representation, all that kind of stuff. If they would have gotten the representation, I don't think the colonists would have said, let's go farm our own thing. Again, in retrospect, we sort of rewrite the story. It wasn't England that they were revolting against. It was George III. It was the tyranny. It was the lack of a public that American colonists were now starting to say, we've been running this show over here ourselves for a long time. We don't really need the king to do stuff. He's only kind of getting in the way. And we use our reason, and we're going to do this a lot better than he's going to do it. All right, here's the backfire, though. Let's talk about the backfire. Historically, we can say pretty easily that the American Revolution, for whatever you want to say, it worked. I mean, however you want to define that word, it kind of worked. The Americans broke away. They had a rough go of it at the beginning, but they kind of took over. They grew. They became, by the 20th century, a global power. You can pretty much say, and then we could even say today, like if you look around the world, what is quote unquote normal government? It's going to be democracy. That's sort of considered normal today. So, okay, it worked. But here's the thing. There are essentially two successful applications of radical thought at this point. There's the War of American Secession, and then there's the French Revolution. The French Revolution is just English radicalism in France. That happens just a little bit later. And this is where we talk about the backfire of the whole thing. Both put the people in charge, but they both did it at huge costs, especially from the position of the English radical. Here's John Wilkes. I got to do cross eyes right there. From the English radical position, yeah, the people are in charge. I like that idea, but man, was it really worth it? Like in America, okay, the people are in charge in America, but what that ended up doing is weakening the best hope for the world, which is Britain, right? Those English radicals are saying, man, that really backfired on us a little bit. The other is the French Revolution. You don't have to do a lot of study about the French Revolution to know about the terror that followed, the guillotines and all that kind of stuff, which then ended in wars, civil wars, and then Napoleon, and then the European War. And essentially, these radicals back in England are going, yes, people should have the power, but look what happens when people get the power. A lot of negative things happen. And that's going to be a big conversation that happens. Like, is Paine right? Is Thomas Paine right that if the people are in charge, that's going to be a better world? Or is Thomas Paine wrong that the people can't be trusted to make those decisions? Still a conversation we have today. We like to think democracy is a great thing, but then we look around the world at some places that get democratized and we say, and they end up in civil war, like take Iraq in 2003. Saddam Hussein is removed from power and a democracy springs up. And so does civil war. So is democracy the way to go? Ugh. Here's the response. The response you're going to get in England is this guy named Edmund Burke. It's called conservatism. And Edmund Burke was pretty sympathetic to the American Revolution. Didn't like the French Revolution, but the American Revolution, he said, you guys got some good points. I trust you guys. Go do your thing. So he agrees that, yes, the power of government should be diminished. And by that he means essentially the king should sort of take a back seat to the parliament, let the people be in charge. Here's the problem, though. Revolution and universal suffrage are not the answer. And here's why. Because what you're essentially doing is saying to all the people, you guys have use of reason, go for it. But then, Thomas, with sure enlightenment here, you say, hold on. These two people here don't use their reason. Maybe they're women, or maybe they are a different race, or maybe they're poor, whatever. They clearly don't use their reason. This guy does, so it'd be good if he's in charge, but not the rest of these people. So something we'll call the elites, the elitism sort of here. If these guys ever learn how to use their reason, great, but that's the thing. So we shouldn't just sort of overthrow society and just take everything we've done up till now and just toss it out. Because the people who were basically using their reason still kind of help set that up. It's not that we don't need to tweak things. We need to tweak things. We just don't want to toss it all out. So stick with traditions, especially, for example, the Glorious Revolution. That should be sort of our guidepost. And then change things, but change them real slowly. Don't just sort of say, revolution. Because what happens when you have a revolution is you essentially say to everybody else, if you guys want to have a revolution the next day, go for it. If you guys want to have a revolution the next day, go for it. You essentially make a society that is based on whatever the society wants to do at that time. And that's not, and again, the thing that conservatism really talks about is order and security. And that's going to be the big conversation. You're going to talk about this next week with Dr. Tate Peterson as well. You're going to see some conversations about this because this is going to come up when you're talking about women's rights and we're talking about equality. So that's it. You're gonna watch some stuff on read some stuff and watch some stuff on neo-colonial art form, but I'm not going to come back and do anything with that. So that is week 4. Yeah, week 4. So see you guys later.